Hi, I'm Dan McFadyen, co-founder and managing director at Edalex. I'm very pleased to have with me today Kate Valenti from Unicon. Kate is the co-CEO of Unicon, and she co-leads the senior executive team in all aspects of corporate operations, alongside founder and co-CEO John Blakely. Kate is responsible for the profitable execution of market strategies, as well as internal operational efficiency towards Unicon's goal to deliver outstanding service to clients and significant impact to learners. Throughout her career at Unicon, Kate has previously held key leadership roles, including Chief Operating Officer and Senior Director of Integrations and Analytics. Previously, Kate worked at Capgemini Ernst & Young as a management consultant with a focus on enterprise application integration. Kate, thanks so much for joining me today. Great to have you.
Thanks so much for asking.
Yeah. Well, and thinking back, we first connected in 2017 or 2018 when Unicon and Edalex were collaborating to take, at the time, the software known as Equella, to take that open source, which now seems like really ancient history. But for those who don't know Unicon or don't know some of the more recent changes with Unicon, can you fill us in?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like so long ago. Unicon is a 30-year-old education technology services provider. So that's the first thing that typically it surprises folks. It's 30 years old. I like to say we were calling ourselves an EdTech provider before EdTech was sort of a thing. But we have a North Star around really supporting and improving learner experiences. So those digital experiences that learners have to interact with every day, our mission is to make sure that those are as seamless and as fruitful as possible for learners. We don't have a product, so we are a consulting and services organization, and essentially our people are our product. We deploy specialized teams with domain expertise, and the clients that we work with are EdTech. So for EdTech, we help them bring their products to market. For schools and institutions, we solve both strategic and operational gaps in that they may have needs for in the areas of application development, data integration, identity, and cloud. And then for foundations and other funders, we help to advise around the future of grant making in the EdTech space. We do have roots in open source. So we, for a long time, were known as an open source company, but mostly that is the ethos of let's use components that help our customers to maintain and to deploy things as cost effectively as possible. So open source and open standards are a big part of our story.
That's a wonderful story, and yes, 30 years. So that is quite the record and testament to Blake and many others, and certainly you as well. And how long have you been at Unicon now?
I just celebrated my 20th anniversary this year.
Wow, 20 years! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So that's then the history, and then the last time we cut up face to face was at the CBE Exchange conference just in October. Which is always a fantastic event that Charlotte Long and her team put on. So that's why I'd love to start our discussion today around CBE, competency-based education. And I know you and Unicon have done some pretty significant work in that space. So can you fill us in on that and why you think why is now the time for CBE and why is the interest in it really increasing?
Absolutely. Yeah, we see CBE as really an area of expansion, both from the academic perspective as well as from the technological perspective. So competency-based education, essentially a learning modality that places an emphasis on measuring learning by what a learner knows and can do. So rather than being able to describe a capability, actually demonstrating the knowledge and skills and behaviors that denote mastery for learning, essentially. In CBE, learning is measured through that mastery of competency rather than simply through seat time, like it might be in a traditional program. I think there are a series of forces that are kind of converging in the education space right now. These are true specifically in higher ed, but market forces that hit post-secondary often have a way of spilling into K-12 and spilling into the workforce. So those include things like better outcomes, learners just wanting to be sure that they know what a credential or what the money that they're putting into a program will get them, lower cost options, and then more flexibility in terms of where and when that learning is happening. So how does that relate to CBE? Why does CBE become a modality of interest? Well, CBE allows for student pacing, so it allows the learner to set the pace of their learning, whether to speed up or slow down based on their individual needs. Many CBE programs allow credit for prior learning, which means that folks who have invested in military careers or have experience that comes from on-the-job work that may not necessarily be reflected in a credential or a degree actually gets counted toward their education. And then CBE also helps to map skills and competencies directly to workforce needs. So when you're talking about that trade-off and making sure that the degree is going to be worth something, when you go through a program that is specifically designed for the applicability of the credential to employment, you have a better sense of what you're going to be able to do with that credential when you get done. And so that in higher ed, CBE can be used both in degree programs as well as in non-degree credentials that a lot of learners are seeking right now.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And recognizing all the financial pressures and the increases in tuition and cost of living, it just makes sense on so many different levels. And I think when we have the Carnegie Foundation and others coming out and saying it's time to move on from seats on, that's a fantastic endorsement. And so carrying on with this theme and building on the comments that you mentioned already in terms of how you work with various institutions, can you fill us in on that side of things, and what are, from the institution perspective, what are some of the best practices, pitfalls to avoid? What have you learned through this?
Yeah, we've learned so much. So even though CBE as a pedagogical approach has been around for decades and decades, it's only in more recent years that we've had the opportunity to work with schools that are running traditional programs and then starting to sort of explore what building some competency-based programs might do for their learners. And unfortunately, what that means is that many schools are trying to fit CBE programs into traditional built architectures, which, as you can imagine, presents its own set of challenges. So what we've seen over the past couple of years is the interest in CBE has grown, but a lot of the technical limitations for end-to-end system implementations has really remained. And while there are some very successful purpose-built systems in the CBE ecosystem, not to name any specific products, but in the areas of credential management or authentic assessment, for instance, most of the systems that power CBE programs weren't actually built for CBE. So the technical lift can be considerable. And a lot of the work we've done with clients over the past couple of years has been really in the realm of evaluation work. So helping schools to look at what are the current state systems they're running, what does the future state need to look like to support the CBE operating decisions that they've decided that they want to deploy inside of a program, and then how do you build that roadmap to get from current state to future state. So I think we're going to need kind of the big higher ed tech providers to make investments in purpose-built functionality for CBE, and we're starting to see some of those features get added to roadmaps. But Instructure's announcement last week of the acquisition of Parchment obviously is a huge signal of the thought of building ecosystems for supporting these digital skills versus a traditional programs, over a learner's lifetime. So that's really exciting from our perspective as an advancement in the space. Yes,
and the and from some of the discussions that I had at CB Exchange and more broadly, it is, as you flagged, it's from K-12 all the way up, community colleges, universities, systems. So people, organizations are thinking about this on a really massive scale.
And in addition to that, some of the interest comes from the more non-traditional learning providers as well. So sometimes I feel like when I talk to higher ed institutions, there's so much about higher ed implementation that is just rooted in its traditions that sometimes it can be hard to break out. Whereas there are alternative learning providers that are maybe able to be a little bit more nimble in adopting features that are more CBE friendly. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch where higher ed goes in the next couple of years and how much they're able to embrace kind of the skills as the new currency.
Right. No, totally agreed. And one of the expressions that I heard at the conference that I loved was think big, start small, move fast. Right. Yeah. So, is CBE something that can be implemented in a couple months, or like what's your sense and feedback there?
I think it's hard. I think a couple months is a very short time frame in any it's like when somebody tells you it'll only take 15 minutes. Nothing ever takes 15 minutes, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think it really depends on systems that are being run. So I assume the question is in terms of a digital program. Obviously CBE does not require technology. CBE as a pedagogical model does not require technology. So there are lots of, you can teach kindergartners a lot of things and have them show you how they tie their shoes, right, that don't require technology. And that's a very simple example. But
sure.
I think when it comes to digital programs, it really depends on the systems that are being run, and then how broad and diverse the operating functions are that you want to adopt. So things like if you're changing a faculty model so that faculty can swarm on assessments and can sort of pick an assessment and help to do that authentic assessment kind of in I like to call it kind of an Uber framework, grab the next person who needs assessment. That takes time. That there are a lot of ramifications for asking faculty to swarm in that way. So there's some more complicated operating models. If you're just doing some much more simpler use cases, then you might be able to spin something up in a matter of months. But it is a fairly complicated kind of end-to-end conversion.
Right, and I think it's important to share that information rather than in some individuals or institutions they think, okay, yeah, we can just let's knock this out by the end of the year, and then we're right. off and running. From a tech, you mentioned there's a pedagogical aspect, but then a technical aspect. What are you seeing in terms of the technology that should institutions look to set up a very bespoke, custom environment for CBE, or work it in through the existing, even if it's not perfect, but use our existing systems and architecture? Or both?
That's a great question, and it's a little bit of a do as I say, not as I do. When we look at the institutions that are the leaders in competency-based education, a lot of them have built very bespoke technical implementations. And the reality is that most schools that want to do this just don't have the capacity, whether it's time or funding, to be able to do that. And so even though some of the hallmarks that we look at of CBE implementation are very custom, the schools we're working with are most often saying, how do we do this with the systems that we already have, because we don't have the ability to go and make a bunch of new purchases. So trying to be very mindful and intentional about the places that we do recommend to add a system, and then trying to be very practical about the ways that we reuse the systems that are already entrenched. It's very difficult for a CBE implementation to uproot an SIS inside of a school. I mean, just think about how that would work. So we have to live with the SIS that we have. We have to make use of the LMS. The good news on the LMS side is that most of our large market leaders in LMS are behind CBE, and they are thinking about how to add features that allow those CBE implementations to be more seamless. So there are movements in the technical space. I don't want to represent that there aren't, but it's still then from there, what are all of the platforms that you need in order to plug in for assessment, or to plug in for communication, or to plug in for competency management or credential management. So there are a number of other components that you end up having to integrate into that final solution.
Perfect. No, that's great wisdom there, Kate. So lots of experience. And do you see that institutions are looking to switch 100% to CBE, or have hybrid, or again, part of this years-long process? Because obviously there are the giants of CBE like Western Governors University, but and they would have bespoke systems and built from the ground up. But every existing institutions are coming from that more traditional model. So are they looking to make a whole transition, or
they're not? They're looking to pick specific programs, or in some cases specific departments that fit CBE, and start with those to be proof of concept to sort of pave the way. And then many of them are saying, well, if we do that and it's successful, that gives us a way to talk to other departments and programs about the benefits of doing things in a competency or skills first way. And then they're hoping that that would then create the momentum on campus.
Perfect. No, I think that makes a lot of sense and is also realistic. Having work with the systems that you have, work with the models that you have, and introduce. Yeah, think big, start small, and move fast. So
there you go. There you go.
And great to know that there are companies like Unicon that are out there to assist with the evaluation and the implementation process. Brilliant. Well, thanks for that. I'd like to pivot to a different topic and one that does seem to come up quite a bit in discussion. In fact, I don't think we can have any discussion without talking about GenAI, right? And probably anything that we say, during this discussion will obviously be obsolete by the end of it. We'll have to say, oh wait, something else has changed. There's a new platform out. But for the next couple of minutes, we'd love to hear, what you're seeing in terms of institution, in the education space, GenAI. I think a lot of the initial reaction was fear. And oh, wait, no, students are going to use this to cheat. Well, it's now, woven into everyone's daily lives. So what are you seeing? How are you advising institutions and organizations on it? Where do you think the future is?
Yeah, I was checking the clock to see. It took us 20 minutes to get to the GenAI topic. We haven't said the word pandemic yet, but 20 minutes to get to GenAI. I'm pro AI, but I also am a very practical leader, and I feel like there's a lot of not only fear, but there's also hype around how AI is going to revolutionize things. And no doubt, AI will revolutionize things in our lifetime. But AI, our tools and products, long before ChatGPT was a household name. We've been prompted in our Google Docs for years, right, with suggestions of the next word that we want to use. I mean, that's all AI ML based. So I believe in the short term, we're going to continue to see AI as a feature in the tools we use. So the tools that we use and interact with every day will get a little bit smarter based on the ability to process these large amounts of data and anticipate our needs. I think future-focused product organizations are going to continue to offload processes that can be done more efficiently by machines. So that spills in operationally. I mean, I think all organizations need to think about where they have processes that simply struggle to scale when you're relying on manual handling. So these are the processes that I think are going to be reimagined using GenAI. In K-20, that could be administrative functions, or it could be nudges, or career and skill matching, right? There are lots of different areas that don't need a human to do the lift. But then the benefit of that is when we offload the processing in that way, that allows the humans to focus on where they actually should be in the value chain supporting other humans. Right. So it's similar to, I feel like a decade ago, this was the conversation about the LMS, like would it revolutionize teaching? No, it helped to offload some of the processes that faculty members got stuck in and allowed them to be more available, for instance, right? So I think that that's what we're going to see with AI, is it's going to offload some of that that processing that today is manual, so that the humans can interact with the humans in a better way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very positive view and realistic, right? So there is a hype, and it's something that we need to be aware of. Certainly the downsides, the negatives of it, but I know, for our team, we've woven it throughout our internal processes, operational processes, and certainly from platform perspective as well. Do you? From an academic perspective, I don't know if, do you get involved in any of those discussions? Are your clients concerned about, the students using it or the staff using it?
Yeah, students, we don't get so much involved in the faculty to student sort of tangle of how folks might use it. Although I'm very interested in that conversation that's going on. And so I tend to read all the articles that I see about that. And I think that will get to a healthy place where faculty are able to find ways to use it as a tool. I'm a broken record on my graphing calculator, right? I can hand my 5-year-old a graphing calculator. He can't do calculus, right? Right. So you have to sort of understand how to use the tool. And I think that there are ways that faculty will find to integrate those tools inside of courseware, so that, again, we're offloading some of the things that don't necessarily need the thought, or we're creating writing buddies, or we're creating other kinds of supports using the AI for first drafts, for papers, those kinds of things. I think they'll find ways to do that. I mean, faculty are smart, right? They'll find ways to utilize those tools inside of their work so that that becomes less of a conversation about, is it a cheat or not a cheat? In terms of staff, definitely in the context of implementing new systems, definitely in the context of, we have a big identity and access management practice. So the conversation can come up around, what could we be doing to help with functions and grouping and things inside of our identity platforms in order to make use of these features. I still think it's a lot more conversation than it is implementation at this stage. So a lot of interest, but not a lot of active implementation. But I expect that to change in the next few years as people just sort of get used to, we just use this as part of our internal process or part of our product feature. It's just something that becomes another tool that we can use.
Right. No, I think that's great. And I do see some very strong positives in terms of the a further push for authentic assessment. So multiple choice, or that's not going to cut it anymore, right? So so how can we have the students prove their knowledge or skills but then how do we scale that, right? Because part of the challenge of that, and again, that's where GenAI can help, and in terms of the one-on-one tutoring, training. But it is an exciting opportunity, but certainly something that's that we all have to keep our eye on and look at what are the latest developments and where do we go from here. So
get out our crystal ball.
Yes, and I think we'll probably have to record another session later and then splice it in here so that you can say, and of course this is happening.
Exactly. So, I know. I mean, last Friday we had a big boom in the world of OpenAI. So yes, it's changing so quickly. Yeah, brilliant. Something that hasn't been changing as quickly, but it also has a massive impact on the education system is the broad decline of the number of American students going through higher education. And this has been happening for years, and we've seen some positive upshoots, but then some of the more recent news is negative again. So and certainly from an institutional perspective, for many institutions, this is an existential question as that enrollment continues to decline. And then broadly for the economy, what does that mean? How are we tackling the skills shortage? Because we know globally 79% of companies are struggling to find people with the right skills. And again, ties back to CBE as well. But from an educational institution perspective, what do they need to be thinking about? What should be on their radar, and how can do you have any thoughts on how they might be able to turn things around, or at least things for them to consider? Yeah, and I don't want to paint too broad of a stroke that's a generalization across all of the enrollment declines, but I don't think that there's any secret in the changing demographic of the average learner, and the fact that there are a lot of higher ed institutions that are just simply not listening to their customers. I mean, learners are no longer like one monolith. You can create one profile and say, this is how we serve these customers. They have very nuanced needs. And when you look at learners who have historically not been well served by traditional higher education, you have these adult learners who need flexibility, right? They have priorities like families. They work while going to school. They have maybe limited or constrained financial resources. The last statistics I saw, 29% of all undergraduate students and 77% of graduate students are over the age of 25. Okay. So think about that. These are parents. These are folks who work more than 20 hours a week. These are raising and supporting families and extended families. Then you've got the adult learners that are in the statistic of 39 million learners in the US who have some credit, but absolutely no degree, no credential to show for that. And the realization that adult learners come to employers through lots of different paths, not all of which are marked by a degree. So which does not mean they're not skilled. It means that it's not marked by a degree. So I think that skills, this is where skills have to come into the conversation. even if you look at learners who are traditionally well served by the traditional HE environment, they're calling ROI into question. And they're saying, what am I going to get for these large with tuition increases? What am I going to get for these huge tuition increases for this debt that I'm going to incur? And we learn that 90% of learners go to college for a job. They go to college for employment, right? Which is not the statistic that it was 50 years ago, which there was a lot more sort of altruistic vision of education. So I think that these changing trends really call for a change in the approach to matriculate learners. And this is where skills comes in. Because when we define learning by skills and by competencies, we give learners that language to describe what they can do. And when we give them that language, we give them a currency essentially to exchange with employers. And employers, on the other side, can express their needs via the skills language as well. So taking a job description and making it skills-based. And so when we accommodate those changing needs of learners, institutions have to be thinking, number one, who are my learners? They need to be thinking learner-centric. E-commerce, retail folks think about this a lot. Higher education, I think, needs to do their soul searching on who are our learners and what do they need from us. And second, I think that they need to define their skill strategy. So how are they going to promote a learner from enrollment through a program of study with incremental signals of achievement, right? Not there's one big thing at the end, but these are learners who need incremental signals in order to get jobs, in order to get promoted before they've finished a credential. And then how do we, leave them with demonstrable, trusted credentials that can then be read by the workforce. So if we're listening to our users and they want jobs and they need jobs sooner rather than later, right? There's a different cadence that higher ed can set up to enable learners to achieve those incremental goals that they have. So I think higher ed really needs to be taking a deep look at who are their learners, what are they designing for, and then making sure that their programs fit those needs. I know that's easier said than done.
No, but yeah, well said. And there's a lot to unpack in there, but I think, as you're talking, one thing that struck me was a conversation I had. Fortunately, now it was quite a few years back with a leading Australian university who was expressing that their students were not customers, right? That those students were privileged. They had the privilege to attend that august institution. But we're seeing that change and that shift to skills across. It's always been present to a certain degree in the community college or TAFE sector here in Australia. But universities are recognizing that as well. And you talked about the 39 million individuals who are trying to crack that I love the expression, cracking the paper ceiling, right? They don't have that diploma, that degree. And so unfortunately, historically they'd be recognized as, or they'd have a black mark against them, and that, they didn't see it through or they didn't finish it. Whereas the model, you and many and us and many others are saying, let's recognize skills as we go, credential those human skills, durable skills, 21st century skills, as well as domain specific skills all along. And there's so much great potential that it's just not, businesses aren't recognizing it. But as you said, it's also on the learner, not having that vocabulary, not having that voice or evidence to be able to put their own unique voice and share the skills that they do have and how they can really help a number of different organizations.
I think it's possible that we tend to have these conversations about higher ed and we think about 18-year-old, 19-year-old students who are coming from high school directly into a college environment. And the reality is, like, you think about the 50-year-old technologist who has worked in an actual job for 30 years, didn't get a degree, but has 30 years of experience inside of that job and then gets laid off. Like, that's a learner who does not have a paper to demonstrate that capability, but I can guarantee you likely has more impact on day one than a fresh out of college, a newly degreed learner. And there's places for both of those people, but there are use cases beyond those that are going through a more traditional path. And I think that that's where, when we talk about who are the learners and how can higher ed really react to the changing demographics, those are just situations that we need to acknowledge exist. And that helps to create those paths. And you create lots of different paths to that final, whether it's a degree or a non-degree credential that allows then that person to get back into the workforce. I mean, those are really the life-changing moments for higher education.
Really, really important. And I think, we're also seeing, and I know for us as well, when we look to hire someone and we get an applicant who's fresh out of, if we need a programmer, like, oh, okay, well, you would have learned a certain amount at college or university, or whatever the program was. But will you have that practical hands-on? Can you hit the ground running? Whereas the other example that you flagged, and that's where we are seeing boot camps being integrated into more traditional degrees, and so that very practical, competency-based, true, realistic experience. And again, for the learners to be able to validate that and demonstrate that is so important. So yeah, brilliant. Well, look, we could spend hours just talking about that, but I'll keep moving us on, because I'm sure we'll have to come back and read the latest on GenAI, see what things have
it's been 15 minutes. Something has changed, so for sure.
So circling back to Unicon, maybe for the last couple of questions, what are I've pushed the discussion around CBE and GenAI and education more broadly, but yeah, what are some of the initiatives that you're excited about, that you're working on at Unicon that I guess that you can share with us?
Sure. Yeah, we have a really diverse portfolio, so I'll just pull a couple out that are top of mind. So one of the supports that we've been doing over the last 12 to 18 months with the Gates Foundation has been thought leadership on a learner information framework. So this is very relevant to the skills and credentials conversation, but the learner information framework basically has convened interested parties and experts from all over, from technology firms, from data standards committees, basically to explore how technology can be used to collect and describe a person's whole experience. So that sort of idea of a longitudinal learner record. Okay. And this has, diverse groups coming in and providing their input into what this could look like, that would not only be able to describe those learner experiences, but then be able to explore, what are the guidelines and the processes for how that information should be protected, how it should be accessed by stakeholders when it's needed. So it's a pretty comprehensive view, and it's early in its infancy in terms of just getting started with some data models and things, but it's really interesting item to watch. So you can go out to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation website and kind of see a briefing on LIF, but that's something that we're excited about. On the K-12 side, the example that I'm most excited about right now is we're working with our friends at Education Analytics and several regional service centers inside of Texas to build out the Texas Education Exchange, which is an effort to deliver sort of essential data infrastructure services for K-12 districts and charter schools in Texas. Right. Basically to streamline those systems that allow educators to stay focused on students and to surface up insights and things that can be shared broadly across Texas K-12. So I have that has the opportunity to be really impactful to those districts and hopefully a model for other states. So that's the other one I'd call out that's really exciting to me right now.
No, and those are both fantastic. And just and just on the Texas, I've seen a stat that in K-12, the typical teacher is only spending 49% of their time actually engaging with students, right? Yeah. With the learners. So most of the time is admin and so many other things. So that's a huge initiative. And again, if you can make it work in Texas and expand that elsewhere, then that's a wonderful benefit to the teachers, to the admins, but most importantly to the students. And then your work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is fantastic as well. And I know there are lots of interesting initiatives here in Australia. There's it's early days, but they're planning to roll out a national skills passport, and EU is really moving forward in that area as well. So I think we're seeing leadership in a number of different areas, and so great to see that you're playing a key role in some of those really important initiatives as well. Great. And then, we're drawing close to the end. So thank you so much for your time so far. But one more question around Unicon. I have very wonderful memories of visiting the Unicon office in Phoenix, and I think it was close to Halloween. So there are these fantastic decorations, right? So I remember a tree growing out of certain areas as the teams built out their Halloween decorations. And now maybe those stay up year round, but in this day and age of remote work, and when I see those beautiful trees in the background, that doesn't look like Phoenix. So how do you continue to grow and maintain your the Unicon culture, and for you as well, having now stepped up into this amazing role of co-CEO and very very deserved. How are you doing that and building and maintaining and strengthening and reinforcing the wonderful Unicon culture?
It is an exciting time to take the reins. It's also sort of an unprecedented time with this remote first expectation from employees. But just a comment on our work first. So our work has really always been distributed since our clients are all over, and we don't have a heavy travel culture. I come from management consulting in a heavy travel culture, and a lot of us came to Unicon because that was not the life we wanted to live. So our project teams have served our clients in a remote way since the very beginning of the firm. So while our in-person presence is admittedly much, much smaller than pre-pandemic, so it took us 41 minutes to get to pandemic, our work itself really hasn't changed that much. That said, I haven't really codified this, but maybe 3 things that I'll say about building and maintaining culture. At first, at Unicon, we have 5 core values. So our core values are integrity, mastery, impact, curiosity, and uplift. And our first rule is hire well. So when you have these guiding values, it's imperative that you use them in hiring, no exception. Yeah. Everybody knows when somebody doesn't check one of the values boxes. And when we hear that, they're not hired. So our employee engagement surveys that we do quarterly with our folks internally tell us that the #1 reason people work at Unicon is because of their teammates, the people they get to work with.
Great.
So one of my jobs is to make sure that we continue to foster a culture that attracts and retains really exceptional people. And that's very important to keeping the culture that we have. The second rule for our talent is, and this is remote or not, but giving them the autonomy to do their jobs well and then provide support when and where they need it. So we don't have people managers inside of our services department. And sometimes our new hires are like, what do you mean we don't have people managers? Right. We have project managers, and project managers are critical to the delivery success of our client engagement. But we don't have people managers in our services team. It's just not overhead that we care to pay for. And when you have high performing adults who want to own their own work effort, you don't place a manager over them, poking them for status, right? You give them the right amount of support and then you get out of their way. And that's our cultural approach. So third thing I'll say is that we really truly respect our employees' home lives. And we recognize that, especially in a remote first workforce, each employee every day blends work and home. And I don't say balance, because in the visual of a balance, one is up and one is down. Okay. So to me, it's a blend, and people are inviting you into their homes, which is usually where their work environment is, and that blend is something that shows us all that each of us are multidimensional human beings. And when you treat people as such, and you recognize that they have home lives and work lives, they bring the best of themselves to work because they know that they don't have to be one thing over here and another thing over here. So the average tenure for Unicon employees, I'm proud to say, is 10 years. Wow. We actually have people celebrating 25 this year who are not our founders. And as you know, culture is not the executive team or the founders, it's the collective behavior of the group. So we're very grateful to have employees who have been here for a decade or two, and these folks model the culture in their team interactions, their client interactions. And then our newer employees are able to sort of see that and learn the norms through those remote interactions, but very personable Zoom chat, lots of ways for people to be connected. So coming full circle, when you hire for those shared values, you allow newer folks to add to that collective culture in a way that keeps Unicon a great place to work. And I'm very proud of the culture that we've built and the people who make it that way, all of our employees.
Well, you definitely should be, and everyone that I've interacted with at Unicon has really impressed me, and that's a very refreshing attitude. I think some of what you read in the paper or online about and they tend to be some of the larger organizations saying no, everyone has to come back to the office, and to me that seems short-sighted. That through the pandemic, we've seen that we can just get on with things, and so that humans are adaptable, and so to force everyone into a single model and back on the highways and in traffic and away from that blend of their lives, of which work is a very important part. To me, it just seems short-sighted. So we likewise try to find that balance. But I think that's having the right people to fit that culture, and then ultimately to deliver on some of the amazing projects that you described for us today. So fantastic.
And we are looking to create a community of really experienced folks to serve this space, and it would be silly for us to think that we could find them all within the Phoenix metro area. So being able to be more remote friendly allows us to hire from all over, and it allows people, again, to do the things they want to do for their families and in their personal lives, but then also contribute to something that they believe in. So that just makes operational sense.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, Kate, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate your insights across so many different areas, and amazing to hear all the wonderful work that Unicon is doing. So thank you again for your time. And yes, we'll splice in a new section at the end. So just with that update on whatever the latest is on I think we'll have the computers will do that for us. So there'll be,
there you go.
Yes, our avatars will carry on from here.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. Really good to talk to you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Kate. Bye.